Hello, Sorrel. Hello, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
How would you describe perfectionism? What does it mean to you personally?
It's that urge to just make it a bit better, whatever it might be. So it's like you take something which would probably get you an A minus at school, if you see what I mean, and you think, no, I want an A. And so you go and spend another 3 hours working on it, and you go to bed late. To me, is like the epitome of, and I first encountered it when I was a student at university. So that was that thing of like putting in the extra time to get it to be absolutely perfect, and thinking, yeah, but I haven't done all these other things I was supposed to have done.
Oh, so it would be at the cost of doing other things.
Usually, or friendships or relationships, or
Hmm. And when did you know when something was done, that it was now perfect? So now I have studied enough. I'm ready now to go to bed.
well,
How did you know that?
I think that's paradox is that you never know.
Hmm.
I can never be 100% sure that this is perfect.
Hmm.
And I was quite lucky because when I was still a student, somebody told me about the law of diminishing returns, which basically means that, you can go and put an extra 2 hours into that essay or whatever, but it'll only get you a couple more percentage points.
Hmm.
Whereas the first half an hour you put in, you probably got 65 or 70 of them anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And did that help?
Oh, yeah, massively.
So you mentioned that it started with the school work,
Yeah.
and that you just wanted to do it better and better. And when you got that better, if instead of A minus you got A, how did that
Yeah.
work for you? How did you feel?
Oh, I don't know. It was a long time ago. I
Or when you get
okay. I think it felt really good.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be that feeling, that achievement
Yes.
of you.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a bit of a dopamine hit, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so besides that, any other areas that have been affected as you grew up, any other areas that have been affected by your.
Well, I would say more recently, since I've had my own business,
Mhm.
um, there's the obvious thing of like, oh, I can't put this out on social media because it's not ready yet.
Okay.
That kind of
Mhm.
thing. So, endlessly crafting and recrafting a social media post.
Mhm.
Or writing a blog or any of those sorts of things. And then there's that whole thing about thinking, well, I think I need to do a course on this, and I think I need to do a course on that because I'm not good enough yet, which is a bit different from the striving for an A. It's
Mhm.
about that feeling of like, well, am I good enough as a coach? Or when I used to be working as an osteopath in the past, am I good enough as an osteopath?
Mhm.
And that's going to apply to any profession, isn't it?
Yes. So what you're saying is that it kind of creates self-doubt, that feeling of never being good enough.
Yes.
Um, so are you saying that you kind of measure your self-worth with your achievements?
Well, I have in the past. I
Yeah.
wouldn't tell you now. I
Okay.
now know that I'm not my achievements, and that
Yeah.
I talk to people about this, and I say what you achieve has a value, or what you offer as a service to your clients has a value, and that if you're really good at what you're doing, that value is high.
Mm.
You're an, if you're a newbie, you just come out of college. Well, yeah, you probably have a way to go on that.
Mm.
Who you are, who you truly are, your worth can only be a 0 or a 1, and unless you're dead, you're a 1.
Yeah. So what do you think is going on there with the social media posts never being enough?
Oh, that.
Enough.
Well, it just that I don't entirely understand the neurology of social media, but I think it has its own special neurology, and it clearly involves dopamine. And I think it probably hijacks the dopamine system in the way that other addictions do.
Mm.
And I think it also kind of hooks into the whole that whole not being good enough thing, which I would generally speaking assume it has arisen in childhood, whether that's the way our parents responded to our achievements. Or I can remember yesterday I was talking to a colleague about imposter syndrome. So, when we were children at school, our test results were posted on the wall, with the person with the highest result at the top of the list and the person with the lowest result at the bottom of the list. So comparisonitis was kind of drummed into you from the word go.
And it is also interesting, isn't it, how you're rewarded, you are loved and rewarded by your parents when you do something good, or when you get good marks at school, that your
Yeah.
teachers put you at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And people who who are successful, who has got the things, the big house, the nice car,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that they in the society, oh, they must be happy and they've
Oh,
got
yes.
everything. And so there is that um that you kind of grow up with whole thing, don't you? You learn the reward system.
Yes.
So what do you think about that? What do you think about, how did it feel for you, um with people with good marks would be at the top? And
Oh, I was usually at the top.
so that drove you then? That was a drive?
Yeah, that drove me. My family were quite unusual. My mother was a very, very intelligent woman. She was a socialist. She had been a communist briefly in her youth. My father was also a highly intelligent man. He was an engineer. And I was one of the eldest of three daughters. There were no boys in my family apart from my dad. And we were all told, three of us told, that women are definitely as good as men, if not better, and we'd all achieve great things, and we were highly intelligent. And being the eldest, I was probably the one who responded most compliantly to that pressure. So it was easy in a way. It was easy to go to school and get all the A's, and I'd go to university and get first, and that actually was hard work, but I could do it. Later in life with a business, it was a bit different, actually.
So there was that pressure about doing great things as a woman.
Yeah, and I think I did measure my self-worth against my academic achievements. But at the end of the day, it doesn't work. And I had a massively traumatic bereavement in my second year at university. And my go-to escape from that was work, to study. It was the one place where I could be not entirely guaranteed, but less likely to burst into tears without warning. So it was my safe place. So of course I applied myself to my studies, and I did really well. But it didn't make me feel better about myself. It didn't make me happy. It probably gave me something that I could say, oh, I did really well. I got a first.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a way to avoid things that you
It
didn't.
was.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what would happen if that bereavement hadn't occurred, whether I would have done just as well, or whether I'd have had a much nicer time hanging out with my friends and getting drunk and all the things that students normally do. Although actually, to be honest, I was a bit of a bookworm, and I enjoyed studying, and I think I probably would have done quite well anyway, but
Yeah.
aren't no, so there's no point in asking the question, is there?
Yeah. So you mentioned imposter syndrome before.
Yeah.
So what was that about with?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know when it started, but I know when I first became aware of it, and I think it was maybe the first proper job I had. And I can remember sitting at my desk thinking, they've made a mistake. They shouldn't have hired me. I'm clearly not the right person for this job. I can't possibly do it. And I phoned my mother in a panic. And she said, oh, that's okay. That's okay. You've just got imposter syndrome. Don't worry about it.
Oh, your mom said that.
Well, I think she did. Again, it's like a long time ago. That's how I remember it. But she may not have used that particular language, but that was what she was talking about. And she said, it's because it's your first day. You're having a panic attack, but you're perfectly capable of doing this job. Don't worry about it. You're just imagining stuff. I forget how she put it, but she was fighting with my mother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. You mentioned your mom was very, very intelligent, and it sounds like, knowing about imposter syndrome. And how did it go after a while? Did you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I did. I mean, once I realized what was happening in my mind, as it were, okay. And I recognized that I just needed to get stuck in and do what was given to me to do, and then it was fine.
Yeah.
But we all I've had it again as an osteopath, and I've had it as a coach, and I still get it sometimes, but then I know that that's just my mind doing what minds do. It's not me.
Amazing, isn't it? How much awareness can help. Just being aware of what your mind is doing to you, going, actually, I know what you're doing. But
exactly.
we're not jumping on that hook, no.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And imposter syndrome, especially getting a job that you really wanted for a long time, or getting that promotion, is quite normal in the beginning. And it fades away normally, the first week or so, or a couple of weeks. You might feel, am I really worthy of being here? They made a mistake. I don't know what I'm doing. They're going to ask me to pack my bag, pack my bag, leave. And then it kind of fades away. However, if it persists, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I was talking to Jilly yesterday, who works with osteopaths as a coach, she said people have been in practice for 40 years and they still have imposter syndrome, which is interesting.
Yeah. And that can become problematic, or I would imagine.
Well, yes, it is problematic.
That you probably have to compromise some other things in your life in order to make sure that you are doing what you're doing good enough, so that people don't figure out that you're an imposter.
Yes.
Right? If you've been doing that for 40 years, that's,
I
wonder what the cost might have been for that person. So you mentioned that it probably comes from your parents and the way that they brought you up. Any other influences you think that might have?
In terms of perfectionism?
Yeah.
I suppose because we live in quite a competitive society anyway, reinforced by that whole competitive cultural paradigm. I still find myself having to actively make the decision to collaborate with people. And I love working collaboratively. I'd much rather work collaboratively.
Yeah.
But the assumption is, it's like the water we're swimming in is of, working on your own and forging your own path and being competitive. And I mean, that's just so toxic.
Yeah.
And I think probably that reinforces perfectionism. I don't know. I'm just making this up now, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes, collaboration. I agree with you. Together, we can reach more, and we can make more, and make the world a happier place.
Yeah.
With the work together, hopefully. And so, is there anyone else that's affected by your perfectionism, do you think? In the past, you mentioned that.
In the past.
Yeah.
In the past. That's a good question. I don't know. Well, it's entirely possible my middle sister might have been. because she was the one who kind of rejected all of that and didn't work at school and just forged her own path entirely outside of what my mother and father had hoped, well, particularly my mother actually, hoped we would do. I'm just thinking you see, it may have affected my children when they were growing up.
Right.
Yeah, it's really, do you know, it's really hard to pull out the strands, separate them from other things. And I start, there was that thing about, oh, I'm getting old, I need to get on with it. And so my second daughter was born when I was 38. And I started training to become an osteopath when she was only 7 months old. And I if I had more perspective, I wouldn't have gone straight in line. I'd have waited a bit. But there was that drive to get on with it and get going, and I've got to become an osteopath and, start earning a living and
Achieving things
achieving and achieving and achieving. Yeah. But I mean, she's fine now. I mean, we all have our issues and our difficulties, and my children do too. But as my friend once said to me very kindly, well, Sorrel, they're not drug addicts, they're not sex workers. You did a perfectly good enough job.
Perfectly good enough job.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Perfectly good enough. Yeah. So in terms of time, time that you spend on perfecting yourself on things, or working on things that are good enough, how did that steal any time from your family, um, or other people?
Yeah, I'd say it did. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. When I did my training, we were living in Brussels, and I was commuting back to London on alternate weekends for lectures.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely taking time away from my family.
Mm.
But I don't do regrets, so I have no regrets because I don't do regret.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. Yeah, we can't change the past. It's
no,
it's more about having reflections really, and what actually was the codes that you decided, this is what I'll do now. I'm going to be a reformed one. I'm going to change things because this way is not working so good for me.
the big thing for me was I did a kind of sales and marketing course for. It was mostly osteopaths, but also massage therapists and reflexologists, and those kinds of practitioners. And one of the first things they taught us was to be a progressionist, not a perfectionist.
Mhm.
And they kept saying, don't wait till it's perfect, because then you will never get it out there. And they're talking again about probably posting on social media and that type of thing.
Mhm.
So if you want to make progress, you just get it out there when it's still imperfect.
Mhm.
And that really landed for me. Because then I could say to myself, yeah, it doesn't need to be perfect, and I can just stick it out there and see what happens. And if people don't like it, I'll change it.
Mhm.
As opposed to thinking I've got to wait till I've honed it down, to the last syllable, which is what I probably would have done before then.
Yeah. And what have you learned actually by just getting it out there, even though, did it make you anxious to get it out there?
I'm sure it made me anxious. Absolutely, it did, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, I just think that when you recognize that sometimes you've got to do things even though you're anxious, because otherwise you don't make any progress.
Yeah.
It's
Feel
that
the
whole
fear.
comfort zone thing, isn't it?
Yeah, feel the fear, do it anyway. That's
Yes,
how you're gonna
exactly.
grow,
I was
right?
trying not to say that, but it's in the back of my mind. I'm being perfectionist about it.
Yeah, so and Les Brown, he had, for years and years and years, he has been saying, practice, 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 because
Yes,
practice makes progress. Not
absolutely.
perfect.
And
That's how
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
yeah. But never, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. It's about growing.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, if there was anything that you would have changed at that time, what would that be? You know,
Oh,
looking
sorry, which time,
back,
Eileen?
yeah, looking back when you were spending a lot of time perfecting things and trying to achieve more and more, or having that fear of failure, stepping back from it and looking at
Mhm.
it from outside, what would you do differently? What would you say to our audience, so to say, who are doing so?
Yeah. If I was to like speak to my younger self kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do say to young people quite often is, you know what? You really want that first and you're worried you're going to get a 2-1. But in 3 years' time, no one will give a damn whether you've got a 2-1 or a first. They won't even care which university you went to.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's the same for the rest of us. You can spend a lot of time perfecting whatever it is you're working on. But 3 weeks from now, no one's going to give a damn.
Yeah.
And what's important is that you did something that gives you some sense of accomplishment without it having to be the absolute top sense of accomplishment. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's you know, you could even almost say the better it is, the more sense of accomplishment you have. But there's probably the same law of diminishing returns as there is for grades. And why beat yourself up and work yourself to death? And actually, what I haven't said to you is I've seen this much more in my clients and my patients who've burned themselves out, because I used to work with a lot with people with chronic fatigue syndrome and then with long COVID.
Mhm.
And I've never done that to myself, actually. Um, and there must have been some inner wisdom that pulled me back from that degree of overwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely sounds like it, because um in our last episode I was talking with Julia Kurt, and she has been in the corporate world leader for many, many years, and she has been talking about uh, how, if as a leader you're not watching, the perfectionists tend to burn out.
Yes.
um, so that,
Yes.
you know, as a leader you kind of are aware of the different tendencies in your team, the different characters, and that you make sure the perfectionist doesn't burn out,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they tend to go to more detail and more detail
You
and then do
do.
more detail, and it's never perfect. It's never, you know, it has to be 150% before it's ready to be delivered. So burnout,
Yeah.
it's quite um, it's quite normal. Um, it's reoccurring for perfectionist people.
Yeah.
And the funny
It's,
thing is, they don't know, do they? I mean, would you have considered yourself? Would you have called yourself at that time, "Oh, I'm a perfectionist"? Did you know?
oh, I think I knew quite early on.
You did.
I don't think I'd have said so when I was at school, but I think at university I recognised it.
Mm.
Somebody pointed it out to me. To be honest, Eileen, I can't really remember, but I do remember that learning about the law of diminishing returns. And I'm so glad I learned that when I did, and not like 30 years later.
Yes. Yes, before the habits became really strong.
Yes, absolutely. And by which time I probably might have burnt myself out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of challenges in my life, had a lot of kind of personal stuff to deal with. I
Mm.
need to add perfectionism, you know, at that level on top of everything else. So
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
lucky.
Yes. So, um, you mentioned earlier that you have this fear of failure when when, or fear of not good enough. So if it's not good enough, then what? When you post something on social media.
What now, you mean, or in the past?
Yeah, yeah. You said sometimes I can feel that if I'm going to post something on social media, I still get a bit.
Oh, I don't really pay much attention to it. I just like
No, it's
doing
just
that
out
mind thing again. Yeah, I I hate to sound like I'm bragging, but I love writing and I'm good at it. It took me a long time to develop the art of writing in a way that other people could understand because I was coming at it as an osteopath, particularly from this medical background with all this knowledge and I was like, people can't see what I'm writing. I need to change that. And it took a long time. And I'd write something and I'd have to edit it down until it was comprehensible. And I send it to a friend and say, does this make sense? And they say, I don't understand what this sentence means.
Right.
And I don't remember how long that took, maybe a year.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't remember. But in the end, I got the hang of it.
Mm.
And now it's just not a problem. And I've just written an email to my list this morning, actually, which I knocked out in about half an hour or so. I've not sent it yet because it needs a bit of perfectionificating. It just needs me to go through and make sure I've not got any spelling errors or, but I won't be spending another 3 hours on it. It's probably another 20 minutes work maybe and find a nice photograph stick in there. That's the bit that takes the time, is finding the perfect photograph.
Oh.
Yes, I have to watch that one. I've got to watch it now. I can remember times in the past where I think, oh my goodness, it's 8:30 in the evening. I spent 2 hours looking at Pixabay.
That's the thing, isn't it? Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
That you get an idea and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna grab that picture. I know I've got something. And then you suddenly realize, oh my God, where did the time go
Yes,
while I was looking
exactly.
at this?
Absolutely. So actually, I said at the beginning that I'm a recovered perfectionist, and that's not really honest. I'm still recovering.
Mm.
And it rears its ugly head in different contexts. So these days, it's going to be the photograph for the article or whatever. Where else do I spot it sometimes? I can't think of any examples now, but
Mm-hmm.
I know that they happen.
It
But
doesn't creep up
it's,
sometimes, does it? It doesn't
yeah,
creep in. Yeah, and you notice it. You're like, I know what's going on here.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
and
then I think I'm quite kind of respectful of my inner critic. I
mm,
say, thank you for pointing it out to me, but I think this is good enough. We don't need to do any more work on this.
I love it.
Just go and get me a cup of tea.
Yeah, I love that. I like that saying, thank you for pointing it out to me.
Yeah,
But we don't need you for the moment.
no,
We're okay.
exactly. Take a holiday, take a rest. Because my inner critic, she really does deserve a rest.
Mm,
She's been working really hard for nearly 65 years. And it's time she took some time off. And she's getting more time off now than she used to. So that's good.
mm. It's uh, it's quite amazing. Apparently, we have got about 70,000 thoughts a day, and about 98% of those are the repeat of yesterday,
Which is
and
so
about
interesting, isn't
80 and 80% of those are in general negative, the critical self.
Yes.
And that is when the awareness comes in, I guess, that you start going, thank you, we've got
Mm,
I hear you, but I am aware of what's going on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just that awareness is so it's just amazing. It's so powerful.
Mm.
And I have an amazing partner, and he will sometimes say to me, Sorrel, what's your self-talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really
And
good. That's really
yes.
good that someone also points out.
Well, he wants me to be the best I can be. And I want him to be the best he can be. So, but
Yeah.
not from the point of view of striving for perfection, just in terms of growing and
Mm,
kind of fully expressed person.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That personal growth. You never stop,
Yeah.
do you?
No, you don't.
you learn something different every day, and you unlock a different level of yourself every time you learn something new,
do.
discover something
Do
new.
you know what? This is a bit off point, but he said something the other day. We were talking, he's a veteran, he was a medic, and we were talking about the anger that veterans feel.
Mhm.
And he said, well, I just say to them, if you want some love and life and laughter in your life, just stop being so angry. Don't have those angry thoughts. And I said to him, but, surely they've been carrying around all this angry baggage. He said, no, they're not. It's just like you, Sorrel. When you realize you were creating that guilty feeling in the moment, you hadn't realized you hadn't been carrying that guilt around with you, that, the heavy rucksack that people talk about. It's the same for the veterans and their anger. I said, oh my goodness, you're right. How did I not realize that? And so actually, I guess we both bring different life experiences and
Yeah.
different perspectives and a kind of a newness of vision, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it does sound amazing, the two
It is.
together with different backgrounds, different experiences.
Yeah.
Still,
And I would never have imagined that I would end up with an artist who is an ex-army medic. I mean, just had never crossed my.
it's an interesting
That's
combination
who
as
he is.
well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's his painting behind me on the wall.
Wow,
Mm.
beautiful.
Which I'm afraid your listeners won't be able to see, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
beautiful.
that was a bit off point.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much, Sorrel. So I guess the last thing I'll ask you is there anything
Mhm.
we haven't covered, or is there anything you think that has been fun about your perfectionism? Any
Oh,
funny
I knew you were going to ask me that question. I was trying to think of anything that was fun about my perfectionism.
that has?
Not so much fun, but I'm a great believer in innate wisdom. And when I go back to those years when I was still at university and I was dealing with that ghastly bereavement, I,
Mm,
that tendency to put the extra hours in on the study was probably innate wisdom because it was a protected space where I could remove myself from the pain of the bereavement for a couple of hours or whatever and focus on what I was studying. And so even though I might have said, well, you know what, you probably didn't need to work so hard, maybe I did need to work so hard at that time. And so I'd always say to anybody, before you discard something as being the wrong thing to do, ask, is it fulfilling an important function for you?
mm,
Because if it is, then, and you do want to change it, then you've got to find another way of meeting that need. And for most of us, it's going to be that, we don't feel like we can be loved unless we get the A's or whatever.
mm,
So deal with the fact that you don't feel that you can be loved, because you can be loved. And there are other, you don't have to be constantly striving for perfection to be lovable, do you? We both know that. But if you just, it's like when you decide to quit drinking, so you take up cannabis instead, or you decide to quit cannabis and you end up on class A. You've got to find a way of meeting that need outside of whatever that pattern was. And perfectionism for me is a little bit like an addiction. In fact, maybe it is an addiction. I'm not sure. You probably have a better handle on that than I do.
that's an interesting take, actually. It's a very good way, usually using perfectionism to firstly avoidance, looking at the things that you have said, that you
Yeah.
have used it as a way to escape of,
Yeah.
from how you were feeling, and the grief that you had to
Yes.
deal with. And I assume that you later on probably have processed this. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
more or less.
yeah,
95%.
yeah. So, um, you know, we kind of, with perfectionism, we try to find our self-worth, and that
Mm.
we are good enough, we are worthy of love, we
Yeah.
are worthy of attention, we are worthy of care if we achieve these things.
Yeah.
But when we achieve them, they fade away very quickly.
Yeah.
And then we're on to
Yeah, then you've got to do it again, haven't you?
we got to do it,
Yeah.
and the bar is a bit higher this time because we have
Yes, that's the other thing.
now is just
Yeah, the bar keeps moving up and up.
yeah, that's right. So, was there anything else that you want to add that I haven't covered, that we haven't covered so far? That any message, any wise words to our audience who might
The
be dealing
uh,
with perfectionism?
yeah, the only other thing I would add, which is from my own personal experience, is that it was only this year that I realised that when my grandmother died, I think I was 6 years old when she died, I lost what had been my safe space.
Mm,
And where my parents were sort of headless chickens with 3 children, my grandmother was very grounded, and she loved me unconditionally.
mm,
And so when I lost her, I lost that safe space of unconditional love, and I didn't realize that. So something, I don't know how it happened, I forgot, but something happened this year, and I thought, okay, I need to refine that space in myself. And that's been amazingly healing, because I could provide myself with that love that my grandmother used to provide me with. And I get it from my partner. So I'm very lucky because there's 2 of us doing it.
yeah, but that's amazing. That's amazing.
So
That
it's just about going back to that point in your life.
yeah,
And then we'll have, even if it was when you were 2 months old, there will be a point in your life when you had that safe space. And then recognizing that you lost it, and then being able to recreate it for yourself. I think that's enormously healing, and it's not easy. I'm not saying you can do it in a flash of inspiration, but it's not hard either.
yeah, it's amazing. It's also just practicing that as well, isn't
Yeah, it is.
it?
Yeah.
Just practicing that you can
Yes, absolutely.
provide yourself that space, that you are good enough, and that you are
Yes,
beautiful and unique. Uh,
all of those things.
yeah, yeah, fantastic. This has been amazing. Thank you so much,
Well,
Sorrel.
thank
Thank
you for
you so
inviting me.
much for sharing your thoughts, your emotions, and your journey with
Thank
us
you.
on this podcast.
It's
Bye
been
bye.
a pleasure.